I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet today. I would also like to pay my respects to elders past and present. My name is Raihan Ismail. I'm a senior lecturer at the Center for Arab and Islamic Studies, and I work on Islam, political Islam, looking at Middle Eastern politics as well. And I will be delivering a session today looking at the Middle East beyond the headlines. So what do I mean by that? So I'll first share my screen with everyone. So I hope you're able to access the presentation. Please let me know if you can't see this. I think you can. I think so. Brilliant. So we'll be looking at the Middle East beyond the headlines. And when we talk about the Middle East, often we discuss the Middle East within the context of conflict in the region. So we're looking at Syria. Of course, we know what's happening in Syria, Iraq. That's what we hear about when we discuss the Middle East. Libya, Yemen. So these are the conflicts taking place in the region at the moment. So the region is also known for religious extremism. I'm sure you're familiar with ISIS, with Al-Qaeda, and more recently, there are discussions about the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, the assassination of Qasem Soleimani, tensions with the US, the sanctions on Iran. So we're looking at issues that are, highly topical when we're discussing the region and the Middle East in general. We also know or talk about economic crisis. That's something that we hear about quite often as well when we discuss the region or we look at the region. The underdevelopment in some countries, how some countries are actually de-developed in the context of Syria. The process has been gradually declining, particularly in terms of its economic development. So we're looking at de-development of Syria because of the conflict there. Yemen would be the same case as well. However, the region is actually more than just what you hear in various media outlets. So the region is diverse. The presentation today will be looking at various aspects of, in trying to understand the region. We'll be looking at culture. We'll also be looking at religion and what it means in the Middle East, particularly in the context of Islam. So let's look at the modern Middle East. Here we have a diverse region with several languages, ethnic groups, diverse landscapes. We have deserts, mountains, rivers. Even when we're talking about socioeconomic situation or conditions in the region, it's quite diverse as well. Some countries are more wealthy than others. Some countries are, quite poor. So Saudi Arabia and Yemen, for example, they're neighbors, and yet Saudi Arabia is in a much better condition economically in comparison to Yemen. So in terms of diversity, we're looking at different cultures, and cultures vary from one country to another, despite the fact that we're looking at the Arab world or Arab countries. We identify these countries as Arab countries, and yet in terms of culture, they're very different as well. So the term culture, it often refers to shared languages, beliefs, values, norms, customs, and I'm taking this, based on a definition provided by scholars. So culture also refers to knowledge and skills that guides the way of life of any society. And we know when we talk about culture, it is inherited from one generation to another through the process of socialization. And yet the term culture or culture is very hard to define. It is imprecise as well. It's fluid, it constantly changes. And we can argue that it has something to do with shared history, maybe notions of genealogy, maybe language, maybe religion, and these factors play an important role in understanding or defining culture and what we mean by culture. It is widely, the widely used definition is that an historically transmitted pattern of meanings embodied in symbols by means of which people make sense of life, where culture provides social orientation. It provides some sense of identity where they feel that this is who they are. So as I've mentioned earlier, again, even when we talk about Arab culture, it differs from one country to another. Even within a country, and this is something that's quite important as well, even within a country, cultural traits differ from one place to another. So we've looked at Arab culture. Some customs or practices are very different. In one country, the Gulf region, for example, have different ways of speaking to people in comparison to Arabs in Egypt or Arabs in Morocco. So we're looking at diversity when we discuss culture in various parts of the Middle East. So when we look at religion and identity, this is another issue that is constantly debated in Muslim societies, but also in the Middle East. We know often Islam is blamed for providing the foundations for extremism, and yet Islam itself is not a monolith. According to one prominent scholar who studied Islam, he argued that there are as many Islams as there are Muslims, and cultural practices influence the practices of Islam and vice versa. So we have Islam practiced in Indonesia would be different from Islam practiced in Morocco, for instance. There are elements of similarities, of course. There are basic foundations of Islam that these countries adhere to or the populations adhere to. However, when we discuss cultural practices, they also play an important role in influencing how Islam is actually practiced and believed in various parts of the Muslim world. And when we talk about religion, when we talk about Islam, there are many interpretations. We have the reformist interpretations of Islam, the traditionalist interpretations, secularists, and even extremists have brought their own understanding of Islam and tried to educate others about their understanding of Islam, arguing that this is the correct interpretation of Islam, this is an authentic interpretation of Islam. That's understandable, right? When you have 1.5 to 1.7 billion Muslims, it is understandable that Muslims would have different interpretations and different cultural practices that would influence how they view Islam and practice Islam. So it is something that we have to take into consideration when we look at religion, when we look at religious identity and Islam in general, and the development of Islam and Muslim societies. Contrary to people's perception when we discuss Islam, the largest Muslim countries are actually Indonesia, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, outside the Middle East. So you have only 20% of Muslims are Arabs. You also have other religions in the Middle East. When we talk about the Middle East, you have Christians in the Middle East and Jews in the Middle East as well. So again, we're looking at a region that is diverse, not just culturally, but also in terms of religion and religious practices. But cultural religious determinism needs to be avoided. When we discuss the region, culture and religion are not uniform. That is another aspect of Islam, and also the region that we have to understand. They're not uniform, not monolithic. Our action is explained by many factors as well, including socioeconomic, geography, and education. And that's the misconceptions the misconceptions that are often propagated when we discuss the region. We look at the region, we look at Muslim societies in general, by focusing on religious identity, by focusing on cultural practices, but we don't really look at how religion continues to change or continues to evolve. Cultural practices continue to evolve and change as well, and they are influenced by various factors, including socioeconomic, geography, and education. Why is this important? What we do at the center is, we still talk about conflict, we still talk about religious extremism, radicalization, and other issues, but we feel that it's so important to understand the region beyond the headlines, mainly because if you do not understand the region well, particularly in understanding the various factors influencing religion and other matters that I've mentioned earlier, it's very dangerous. The lack of understanding contributes to disastrous policy decisions. One example that I would give is the question of Muslim women. We often hear from time to time that Muslim women are oppressed. I mean, not so much now because everyone's more or less focused on the coronavirus and the pandemic, but a few years ago, we hear politicians, including politicians in Australia, talking about Muslim women as, marginalized, oppressed because of Islam and also cultural practices. And I would argue that it can be quite dangerous if you do not understand these societies, if you do not understand the Islamic faith and how Muslims relate to religion. The question of are Muslim women oppressed, for example, has enabled the United States to justify its invasions of Iraq. In 2003, the United States, one of the arguments used by the US is that women in Iraq are oppressed and therefore we're coming in to bring democracy, we're coming in to actually liberate Iraqi women. And today, if you look at Iraqi women, because of the ongoing conflict, the development in terms of its economy, but more importantly, security, insecurity or security dilemma in Iraq, women are in a much difficult positions in Iraq. We're looking at kidnappings, we're looking at a number of issues that women have to deal with. And to reflect this, a scholar, if you're interested in her book, I think it's an excellent book she's written on Muslim women, asking this question, are Muslim women oppressed? In which she, by the name, her name is Layla Abu Lughut, so she's written this book where she interviewed women from various parts of the Middle East. So she went to Lebanon, to Palestine, to Egypt, and interviewed women there. And she asked them this question, are you oppressed? And the overwhelming majority of women whom she interviewed said, yes, I am oppressed. And then she asked a follow-up question. Do you think Islam is the reason you feel that you are marginalized? Do you think Islam is oppressive? And that's when she got a different answer. And she was, these women were puzzled because they said, no, what are you talking about? When I say I'm oppressed, it's not religion. It's actually the repressive conditions that I live under, the state. One Egyptian woman narrated her story where she has a little stall and security officials or corrupt officials will come and demand protection money from her, and she has to give all her income to them, and she goes home not having enough to actually look after her children, being a single mother, being in a very difficult position. So it's very different when we talk about even the issue of oppression and what it means to Muslim women. What's interesting as well, when she was asked, how do you view Islam? And she said, it's the only thing that's keeping me, sane in many ways. Basically, when I go home, I feel upset with my situation. I sit on my prayer mat, I pray to God, I cry, but I find comfort because I feel that this is the only thing that I have. So again, do we really understand Muslim societies? Do we really understand how women live in the region and the circumstances or the challenges that they face? And I think it's so important for us to be able to ask important questions and to actually understand some of these complex issues. Again, another issue as well that is often reiterated, that is constantly debated, is the idea of sectarian tensions in the Middle East. A couple of years ago, in 2014, for example, ISIS massacred the Shia in Iraq. We've seen horrific videos and images that emerge from the conflict in Iraq. But yet we don't really understand sectarian identities and how Muslims relate, or Sunni and Shia relate to sectarian identity or affiliation. When we look at Iraq as an example, we often talk about the ethno-sectarian tensions. Sunnis hating the Shia, the Kurds are unable to cooperate with Sunnis, and so on and so forth. And yet in the 1950s, that was not the case. Sunni, Shia, and Kurdish intermarriage was common in the Middle East, in Iraq, in Bahrain, in Kuwait. Why is that the case? Because they were dealing with different issues. In fact, the resulting children are known as sushi. So a Sunni mother, a Shia father, the kids or the children identify themselves as sushis because it was so common in these countries. Intermarriage was common. Why, when we look at conflict, it's more than just religion and culture and tradition that would contribute to the galvanization of Sunni Shia identity. But there are other sources of conflict as well that we have to understand when we're examining the region. Marginalization, persecution, socio-political circumstances, weak state. Weak state enables authoritarian regimes to control its populations. Corruption and violence play an important role in galvanizing tensions. Authoritarianism, that is another factor that is often reiterated or presented by scholars as one of the factors that would create conflict in the region. Political paralysis, the inability to promote a unified position, or at least bringing different parties to the negotiating table. Economic crisis, also another factor that we have to take into consideration when we understand or when we're examining the region. So after, we're looking at these factors, and I just want to talk about the center a little bit. So besides, explaining or studying culture, studying conflict in the region, studying politics in the Middle East, trying to understand Islam. So there is a course on Islam history and institutions, looking at its history, but also the development of Muslim societies in various parts of the Muslim world. So that's, some of the courses that we offer at the center. So we have a degree. It is Bachelor of Middle Eastern and Central Asian Studies. And I haven't even spoken about Central Asia. And Central Asia is a fascinating region. We have a colleague who works on Central Asia. And what's fascinating, is that he would tell me about Central Asia and Islam in Central Asia, for example. He would say that, in Central Asia, people drink whiskey and eat pork. Which is, of course, these two are prohibited in Islam, according to, the overwhelming majority of Muslim scholars, but there are also minority interpretations on the subject. However, in Central Asia, that's pretty common, a common practice. So again, you have, diverse, cultural and also religious practices in Central Asia, which is, another region that is fascinating to study. We also offer Arabic, we offer Persian, and I'm so pleased to say that we have recently revived our Turkish program. And if you are interested in Bachelor of Middle Eastern Studies, we have a mentoring program. So for students who are doing Bachelor of Middle Eastern Studies as a single degree or a double degree, we have a mentoring program where you are matched with an academic at the center, and the academic will assist you until you graduate. So basically you can have multiple meetings with the academic who would offer support to you. So I think that's all from me, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions you have, including questions about Islam, about Middle East politics, as well as the courses that we offer. Any questions? And by the way, I have to say, I haven't said this. I usually say this, that I'm an academic. Um, I'm an academic who happens to be a Muslim. So I'm not here to present. I'm not here to present as a Muslim. I'm here to present as an academic. So if you think that you have a question and you're not sure whether you're going to be offending me if you ask the questions, I would say that ask anything you would like to ask, because I'm not here as a Muslim. I'm here as an academic, and what we do at the center is look at everything from various perspectives to offer an objective assessment of the Middle East, but also Islam. So I have a question here. What are some common questions you get? As I've said, sometimes when we talk about issues in Muslim societies, there is misconceptions about how Muslims organize themselves, particularly with religious institutions. When we're thinking about religious institutions in Muslim societies, of course, sorry guys. Okay, I haven't looked at the Q&A section, so now I can answer the questions. I didn't think that we had questions. So what majors are available in Middle Eastern studies? So with majors, you can do major in Arabic, and you can also major in other degrees as well. I mean, we have students who do a Bachelor of Middle Eastern Studies with a major in international security, for example. So you have options. And I think with this question, it's important to check with the college, particularly with the student office, because they're going to be able to, offer, better answers than I'm able to offer. What is the difference between Bachelor Middle Eastern Studies in terms of context? Yeah, do we? I would say I have a question here. The conflict in the Middle East today can largely be attributed to the Iraq invasion. I think there are, a number of factors that would explain the conflict in the Middle East, and the Iraq invasion is definitely one of the factors that contributed to the conflict in the Middle East. The situation is very difficult because of the invasion of Iraq. It created a security dilemma within Iraq, but also affected other parts of the region. We're talking about the rise of ISIS, the rise of Al-Qaeda. Iraq provided a conducive ground or environment for the emergence of jihadi groups. But there are also other issues. And this is where Muslim scholars, particularly scholars who work on the Middle East, would argue that you cannot ignore self-inflicted wounds as well. When we deal with the region, you have the structure in the authoritarian structure that contributes to conflicts in the region. So that is something that we have to take into consideration. Corruption and other factors play an important role in understanding the conflict in the region as well. So I hope I've answered that question. What is the benefit of studying Middle East relationships? What kind of jobs do we prepare for? That was a very good question as well. So when we talk about what you can do, I can, there's so many career opportunities if you're studying the Middle East. And I think a language component is important. I know the diplomatic service, for example, where you can, if you have Arabic or if you have Persian or Turkish, it's, you're going to be seen as highly employable. But it's not just, public service in Canberra. I know a colleague of mine who finished his undergraduate degree, did his master's at the center, and and now working as a consultant. So basically working for Goldman Sachs, where he provides analysis not only on security, but also business opportunities to various corporations, particularly when analyzing the Middle East. So he travels to Riyadh, he travels to Abu Dhabi, for example, looking for business opportunities and providing information to various corporations and also companies in Australia. So I think there are definitely opportunities, not just locally, but also internationally when we talk about the region. NGOs, there are opportunities there. Also human rights organizations. There are many opportunities when we talk about what you can do with the Middle Eastern, with a degree in Middle Eastern studies. So I'm studying PPE next year, but want to extend my knowledge further in the current. Absolutely. Sorry, I haven't read the questions. I think everyone has access to the questions, right? Because I will just be reading the question and repeating myself. So do you think I should pursue Middle Eastern and Asian studies, Central Asian studies? I think absolutely. When, it's so, if you're, let's say you're doing international relations, okay, should I? I'm going to say Middle Eastern studies, and I think I'm biased. So basically, I'm going to say you can do international relations if you want to, but having that area interest, I think, doing Central Asian studies, Middle Eastern studies, you're not just going to look at theory. I don't know what they do in international relations. I would imagine it's brilliant as well. But I would say with Middle Eastern and Central Asian studies, you look at the region and you try and understand the region culturally. It looks at the region in an in-depth fashion, which something that you don't get if you do one of the broader degrees. So I would strongly encourage that you do Middle Eastern and Central Asian studies, but I think I'm biased, so it's very hard for me to say do something else. And we have a good team here. Our lecturers, I hope we're all very passionate, and we're passionate about the region as well. So come and join us. And if you have any questions, you can email me as well. You can find my email address, if you visit the center's website. I'm more than happy to entertain any questions you have. Another question, hello, I would like to ask whether religion conflicts would be a focus of study, Eastern studies. I think we look at everything with this. So to answer your question, we look at everything. Not just in terms of understanding religion. We have a course on Islam, history and institutions where we discuss religion. We also have courses on politics in the Middle East. So basically looking at the influence of religion, but not just religion. We're looking at geopolitical rivalry. We look at political economy, or the political economy of the Middle East. So we have a brilliant academic by the name of Jessie Moritz, who works on the political economy of the Middle East. She's a rising star, such an amazing scholar. So she deals with politics, the political economy of the Middle East, looking at the issue of oil. Looking at security in the region as well. So I think we have a number of courses dealing with different issues and not just religion, but that's something that we cover as well at the region. What do you think is more useful? So I hope I'm not skipping questions here. I think Asil's asking a question. Is the Palestine occupation a topic that we can beginning? Yes. Oh, that's a very good question, Asil. We do cover Palestine. I think in the course that we teach, particularly the first year course, Introduction to the Modern Middle East, we look at the construction of identity, but there's 1 week where we look at the Israel-Palestine conflict. So that is something that we cover. We have a brilliant academic who works on Palestine and the conflict itself, the dynamics of Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and she is the lecturer of this course, where she is she's actually publishing a book on I think, if I'm not mistaken, I better get it right. I mean, she's publishing a book on the conflict. I think the book is coming out in October. So you have someone who actually deals with, the conflict and the issue of the occupation as well. So that's something that we do at the center. So I think I saw a question earlier about whether you should do Arabic or should do Persian. Oh, that's a difficult question to answer. Why is that the case? Because I have Persian scholars who colleagues who teach Persian and colleagues who teach Arabic. It's going to be very difficult for me to choose one. I speak Arabic, by the way. So for me, it's much easier to learn Arabic. No, it's much easier to learn Persian from what I've heard. But I think you can do, either with Arabic, definitely the Arab world, and in Australia as well, because you have a vibrant Arab communities in Australia, so Lebanese, Egyptians. So, that is something that you can do as well, because you have Arabic speakers in Australia, but you also have Persian speakers in Australia. So I think you can definitely benefit from learning Arabic or Persian. With Persian, it's not just in the context of Iran that you will be using Persian, but if you go to Central Asia, for example, Persian is very useful. Tajikistan, or if you are interested in studying Afghanistan, Persian will be very, very useful. So definitely, I think it's going to be up to you to choose, but I would say that they're both brilliant languages. Where is Persian? No, yeah, I just answered that question. Fantastic. So where is Persian spoken in the world today? In general, how fluent can you expect to be in a language when you start at the beginning? That's a very good question as well. I've studied Japanese. Okay, if you're Madeline, oh no, sorry. Yeah, if you're, oh, Madeline, you wanted to answer the question, right?
Oh no, I was just setting up the question for you to answer, but so it got ticked off.
Oh, okay.
You can have.
Yeah. It's a new platform, everyone, so please forgive me if I'm missing your questions. I really hope I'm going to be able to address the questions properly. But as I've said again, email me if you want to know more about the region, but also about what we do here. To answer that question, we start from introductory, Arabic or Persian. And I think by the time you finish advanced Arabic, for example, I would say that you'll be pretty fluent. I've had students in the past who did introductory Arabic, intermediate Arabic, then did applied Arabic, where the lecturer will take you to Jordan, for instance, and you will spend a few weeks in Jordan learning Arabic, but also communicating with locals. And I think that is such a great experience to have. And these students, return from Jordan, and many of them, they were fluent in Arabic. In fact, we send students to Qatar to enter Arabic debating competition. So you can imagine, to be able to debate in Arabic against native speakers. I think that's pretty impressive. And the last time we sent students to Qatar, they've won all of the debates, except for, I think they had 2 losses. They had like 8 rounds and lost 2 debates and won 6 rounds. So I think that's, definitely, I hope if you commit to it, and if you're passionate about the language as well, I think you'll, hopefully will be able to do really well and be fluent by the time you complete your degree. Should you do Japanese? Would you recommend continuing Japanese? I'm a believer in learning different languages. So I think if you have Japanese, I think it's great if you can continue and studying Japanese, but also start a new language if it's possible, because you don't want to lose Japanese. And I have to be very fair in answering this question. You don't want to lose Japanese. Make sure that, you continue learning Japanese, because it's a beautiful language as well. But I do think it's important that you, perhaps, particularly if you're studying, doing Middle Eastern studies, it's important that you start a new language, because I think you'll have a fascinating experience. So, okay, oh dear, sorry, Asil, I missed your question there. Bachelor and Master's in Middle Eastern Studies. Okay, that's a very good question. With the Master's program, what we offer is definitely more in-depth analysis of the region. So theoretically, it will be more intense in comparison to the undergraduate degree. So with the undergraduate degree, we start with, basic understandings of the region, understanding theoretical discussions that scholars use to explain the Middle East. In the second year and third year, you will delve into more specific area studies. For example, we are offering a course on Iraq, understanding Iraq, and that will be a third year course. So as you progress, the courses will be more specialized. With a master's in Middle Eastern studies, the discussions will be more complex, if I can put it that way. So you'll have more in-depth analyses of the region, and some of the courses deals with specific areas. For example, there's a course on sectarianism in the Middle East. We don't have a course on sectarianism in the Middle East in our undergraduate offerings, in our undergraduate program, but that is something that we offer at the master's level. I saw a question earlier about Arabic, whether it's a hard question. Oh, no more questions. So I hope I've answered all of the questions, and do let me know if you have other questions now. Is that all? I think so. That's great. Well, thank you so much, everyone. And thank you for attending, and all the best with uni. And please let me know if you have any questions. I'm more than happy to email you and reply to your emails as well. Have a lovely day. Bye.